Okay, we are live streaming in 3, 2, 1.
Good evening. Today is Wednesday, September 20th, and this is the Hendrick Hudson Board of Education meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda this evening? Hold a second. All in favor? All right, let's stand for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
So before we get into our work session that's planned this evening, we do have a small consent agenda of items that are just timely in a timely manner. Did anybody have anything to pull from the consent agenda this evening? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion to approve the consent agenda. May I have a second? Second. All in favor? All right. That's it.
Good evening, everyone, and it gives me really great pleasure. We had a really good day so far today. This is his third presentation, but it does give me great pleasure to present again Maurice Sykes to the Board of Education, to the public. Maurice is a scholar, a writer, and a lot of other things that I could think of. Most important, I think, is a good human being and somebody with a big heart and really understands early childhood education, which is the real reason for asking him to come here and work with us in terms of us looking more at what is it in our framework that we want, and he does a nice job of building, and I don't want to take his thunder away, about early childhood, and what we do with early childhood really reflects on what the district is as a whole. And I know he's been a deputy superintendent in Washington, D.C., and I make the comment earlier that we figured we went back since early mid-1990s when I did some consulting for him in the DC schools, and we remained friends ever since. So with pleasure here, I'd like to welcome Mr. Sykes.
Well, thank you. It is a great pleasure to be here with you in the beautiful Hudson area. I grew up in upstate New York, in Schenectady to be exact, which some New Yorkers don't think is a part of New York. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be here with you. And it's been a very exciting day talking about young children, which is what I'd like to talk about. I also know that you all have read my book, Doing the Right Thing for Children, which was my first book. And then recently I wrote a book called Child Care Justice. And so I would like to start the evening because I made a big faux pas earlier today that I didn't discuss the book that one of my colleagues who's in the audience had marked up the book. She was ready to discuss it, but we went on to other things. But I do want to hear from you in terms of your response to the book or questions you have about the book. Anyone?
In the book, you talk a lot about dignity for children, and I thought that was important. Just it's the part of a holistic approach for kids and learning. So I thought that was very important. And I don't know if you can emphasize on that, the importance of that in community, in parenting, and also in teaching in our curriculum as well, where it applies.
So to talk a little bit about the dignity of children. Any other things that you would like to talk about that the book prompted you to think about?
Social justice and children feeling like they belong where they are, because that's the start of how they will learn.
Okay, social justice and children having a feeling of belonging.
Have my notes here, Maurice.
Good.
Good teacher that you are.
I wanted you to talk about the inclusive practices and how it advocates for creating, or you advocate for creating inclusive classrooms and environments where all children, regardless of their abilities and backgrounds,
Right.
have the opportunity to learn and thrive.
Okay. Inclusive environments. Any others?
I think we all touched on it a bit, but the DEI component and curriculum and just in schools in general, and how we can incorporate that to best give kids the best opportunity in their learning structure as well.
Okay. Any other topics that come to mind?
When he does that, maybe he can talk about the professional development for early, well, all educators, but for educators and
Okay.
staff.
I think I remember, I think it was somewhere around chapter 3 when you were talking about your first experience in the classroom and you were fresh out of school or a very young man.
Both.
Both, yeah, exactly.
I used to have long hair.
And I think you kind of at one point seemed to have a realization that, like, I don't think you knew what you were going into, and then all of a sudden you realized that you were more than enough for those children and the way you connected with them. I think I would like to hear more about what do children really need in those early days.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
Also about the leaders that we have in the schools and how important their role is when we are looking at who they are and how they are presenting all of that to the children and what we want our children to be. I think you nailed a lot of what we want to look at and the questions at the end of your chapters. I think those are really good focus points for us.
Any others?
When you talk about the leaders, there was one reference in the book when you spoke about one of your colleagues and how you're gonna let him go, but you knew he was good,
Mhm.
and how the professional, you had faith in him and you molded him to be even better. You never gave up. So maybe that goes along with professional development and how you lead through example.
And do you know when he read that book, he knew who I was talking about?
I bet you he did.
Okay, are there any others? Well, this ought to keep us here till
Yeah.
3 hours in the morning.
I think we can cover most of them.
Sure. Yes, my teaching technique is to let everyone have voice and to allow time for adults and children to give voice, because everyone's not as quick at responding. And so I do think we have enough now to go into, I want to start with, something that I tell people all the time, and that is my true public confession. And that being that all that I know and am able to do, and all that I've learned and have come to understand, I've learned from children. So first and foremost, I am a studier of children and their thoughts and their patterns and their ways of being. And I'm sincere. That first year of teaching, I'm sure I learned more than the children did. Because it's just the nature, and we talked about this earlier today, that teachers who come out of teacher preparation programs are very limited in what they know. I mean, because half of what they teach you, it just doesn't sort of seem to work unless you have an ideal child, which there are none. So you're sort of learning on the job. But something that you said that I think is important for any school district to consider, and that is it's only in schools where we segregate children by age and disability. That coming from a family of 6, my mother never said, I want my typically developing children over here and my non-typically developing children. So it is an artificial constructed notion that children should be segregated by age, by disability, by learning style. I mean, all of those things need to be taken into consideration when we think about the whole child. And so it is curious that as we think about early childhood, I'm curious to know, what does the board think is a good early childhood program? What do you think makes for a good early childhood? And I'm not putting you on the spot, I know this, but I'm curious so we can have the conversation.
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
will go first. I think consistency.
Consistency, okay. What else makes for a good early childhood program? Yes.
I think where a child feels safe and secure.
Where a child feels safe and secure. What else?
Where children get what they need, no matter what level they are on.
So children get what they need no matter what level they're on.
I think an important aspect of that is also belonging. If you feel like you belong to a community, to a neighborhood, you are going to strive to do better. You are going to feel like your voice is being heard. And I think that's a critical component.
So the sense of belonging. And belonging motivates children.
If you,
No, and I'm just affirming what I'm hearing, is that what it motivates children? And so the thing that I've been saying today is that all children need a sense of place, space, and grace. Sense of place, am I welcome here? Do the things in this environment suggest that I am a part of it? And is there space for me to do what young children do? And what is it that young children do? Move. What else do they do?
right, and they learn.
They learn. What else do they do?
Play.
They play. Play is the work of young children. They talk. What else do they do?
They're figuring out life, like how to be amongst other people and how to be comfortable with who they are.
And so in figuring out what do children do, how do we know they're figuring it out? Because what do they do?
They try it.
And what else do they do?
Make mistakes.
They make, and what else do they do?
Grow.
They go, but what are the behaviors that tell us they're trying to figure out life? What else do they do?
They get frustrated.
They get
They
frustrated.
communicate.
And how do they communicate? Question. Thank you.
Questions.
They ask, teachers always have an answer they want, They ask questions because they are what?
Curious.
Curious. And so good schools promote curiosity. Good schools encourage children, good schools, good programs for young children, encourage children to ask questions. I know it would never happen in this school district, but some school districts I've been in, I've heard teachers say, you ask too many questions. And my big thing is that when there were parent-teacher meetings, I always went to bed early because I knew that I was going to be on punishment or in trouble with. And one of the teachers always told my parents that I did good work, but I spent a lot of time visiting with my neighbors. Visiting with that's the term they use, visiting. And I tell people, and so that was to be stopped or stifled. But now, and this board will know, I go all around the country and I get a good sum of money for visiting with my neighbors. So the things that we stifle in early childhood could really be the genius. And I do believe that all children are geniuses. And it is our job to find out to that individual, what is their, where is the genius in the child? So good programs for young children look for genius. They look for what sets this child apart from others. We also, we were talking about professional development and, good teachers make for good students, and young children need the best and the brightest in front of them or beside them or behind them. And so we have to pay attention to who works with young children, because everyone doesn't have, it takes a lot. People say it must be nice working with young children. They're so sweet. Well, first of all, they're not all sweet. And secondly, they exhaust you. By mid-morning, you are exhausted. And anyone who thinks it's easy, I invite you to go into the classroom with 3 and 4-year-olds and see if you're not falling for the principal by a half an hour, because children demand a lot. And so they have teachers who give a lot, who are willing to create place, space, and grace for children. And by grace, I mean that children are not judged by their home language or their ethnicity or their race or their socioeconomic standing. They are judged as geniuses equal among others. That's a very important concept for us to think about. And so if Maurice Sykes was your older brother, and he was in trouble in my pre-K or kindergarten classroom, That doesn't mean I label you. You give me the grace to demonstrate who I am. And this is a little factoid that you might be surprised at. The expulsion rate, not suspension, expulsion rate of boys in early childhood education in preschools nationally exceeds the national expulsion rate in K-12. It's double that. And another factor, and you can look this up, so much so that the US Department of Civil Rights has intervened and makes states now report. And disproportionately, boys of color are overrepresented in expulsion, not stay home for a day, you know. Expulsion is hit the road, jacket, don't come back no more, no, but you know, I'm old, so I talking songs, but what could a child do at 3 or 4 years of age that warrants expulsion? And again, so much so that the US Department of Civil Rights now requires all school districts, states to report their expulsion rate. Why do you think that is? Yes,
You try to fit them in a box. You try to stifle everything that's them
mhm,
to fit into a classroom setting. Sit still.
mhm,
Boys don't sit still.
mhm. Neither do girls for that matter.
All girls don't stop talking. I think that trying to put all those kids in the same box, you know, the same exact box,
Mhm.
to be labeled as a good student is what would cause them to get expelled.
Other thoughts about expulsion?
When you're talking about expulsion, especially of our boys of color, you're talking to a lot about prejudices that adults might come with, that they're automatically making assumptions about those people who are in front of them, those scholars who are in front of them, and they're using their own, some, or might be using their own bias that they previously are coming with as well, which is why I was talking about our leaders have to be mindful of who they are and what they know and who's in front of them.
No, I think that's an important point. And the biases, and we all have them. We just need to know that we have them and put them in check. But your point is well taken. Boys know, kids don't sit still. So put a bubble on it, or, you know, there's too much noise in here. It just doesn't work with how children grow and develop.
I think the saddest part for me about that is that. And I had a boy who was extremely rambunctious as a 3 and 4 year old. And if he didn't have the support that he needed to play, like you said, play space and grace as a 3 and 4 year old, his trajectory for his education, would have been stifled from the very beginning. And that is so incredibly sad that that we have a problem like that.
It is,
It sets them up for their entire career.
well, not to mention their relationship with their parents.
Yeah.
You were what? You mean I can't go to work tomorrow? Because, you know, it creates all kinds of dynamics.
And then it also creates not just the relationship with the parents, relationships with teachers. How are they gonna think about their future teachers if this was what happened to them when they were 3 or 4? They're gonna be scared to be who they wanna be in another environment or not wanna go at all.
Yeah, so their attitude towards school is going to be seriously
Because
altered.
that's the thing, their trust factor is now gone, right? It's now broken, and it's broken at such an early point in their childhood learning that the trajectory for them is gonna not be the same for any other child that it doesn't happen to, right? And school is supposed to be a safe space. It's supposed to be where teachers are listening, they're understanding you, they're getting to know you, and they're giving you all of the tools that you need to try, you know, to just be successful in life overall. And if that starts that early without the leaders understanding what each child needs in that classroom, it's just bad for their future overall.
Go ahead.
I think the leaders also have to know how they're evaluating their teachers. Because teachers are evaluated based on how quiet their classroom is. Is everybody sitting down? Is everything in order? There's not, you know, is it too noisy? We evaluate teachers that way. So I think our leaders
Well,
need to think.
Some,
about
yeah, I think we need to get away from that mindset and have more of the risk taking and more of that play in the classroom, more of the conversation in the classroom. I think that when we talk leaders, we have to really think about that system that we have, that we are evaluating our teachers. What do we want our schools to look like? And that's what we should be evaluating our teachers on.
So not only do we need to pay attention to who we put in the classroom with, we also need to pay attention to who leads these schools, who leads. And I did a section earlier about leading early learning communities, because there is a science to early childhood development. And there are principles of early childhood development. And to the extent that the leader understands that, and that is in a quiet classroom is the order of the day, or an overly accessorized classroom is giving kudos. So we have to pay attention to the teachers and to the leaders. And everyone needs to understand the principles of child development. Anything else on that? So we did the leaders. What did I not touch that you raised the question about? So say a little bit more. Who brought that up? Okay. Say a little bit more about the EI in the book and what you saw there.
I guess for me, the DEI aspect of it is important for the curriculum itself, right?
Mhm.
Because I feel like children reflect, when they read a book, they should see themselves in that book, right?
Right.
They should see themselves in positive characters that reaffirm that they too can do something else. But if all the books that we're giving to our kids just have one race that's, illustrated in them, and the other one is, is just represented in a negative light, they're going to start to, that's the continued reinforcement of what you're teaching those children. So I feel like that is a critical component, so that every child, especially a diverse community like we're living in right now, that every child pick up something and see themselves when they look at it in a positive light, because that lets them know that they can become anything. And it continues to let them feel that way throughout their learning. So I think that's important, that sense of belonging, but also the curriculum is also tied into what our kids are learning on a daily basis.
And so the curriculum should, to a great extent, follow the interests of the children. And the children, a skillful teacher does book selection based on the children, not only the racial and ethnic makeup. We have boys and girls in this classroom. We have children who have diverse interests. Everyone's interested in dinosaurs, which I don't know why, but children have other interests. And do we ever ask the children, what do you want to learn here this year? We can still meet the standards, but we're working with because if we're working with the child's interests, the child is more invested. If the child sees him or herself in the books or the videos they are more invested. So yes, that is it's not an exception, but it's a skilled teacher who knows how to do that. And that's what you want in your district, right?
Yes.
Highly skilled,
Yes.
highly compensated, and I say and highly competent.
And they have to have the freedom to do that. Yes.
So what keeps people from being asleep? Other than,
I'm a high school teacher, so I'm gonna say that book selection is a little bit different. It's departmental.
But
So
in the
maybe
early
it's
years-
different. I don't know how it's here, but in the early
Depends on
years.
what they use in the book for.
So in the early years, can the teachers?
Sure, absolutely.
They have
They
a library.
Pick and change their books year to year.
I also think it's
And
about,
they can do it month to month too, or day to day.
Yeah.
I also think it's about knowing what books are available. Knowing what the students want, knowing what books are available, and being able to, again, take that risk to try it, because a lot of times we get stuck in what we want or what we have been doing. And it's now reassessing every year, who's in front of, every year we need to look at who is in front of me and make sure the curriculum is reflecting those 20-something students that are in that room, not based on what I've done previously, not the way it has been.
Yeah, I always tell the story about the teacher who has this box that's marked science, and it has a bird nest and a broken egg and a twig and a seashell, and at the end of every year, she packs that up and puts it on the shelf, and then when the year Again, she takes it off the shelf and starts, and to remind her that that is not the ocean that children hear when they put the seashell. So there, you know, we are driven by standards and curriculum, which neither teach it. They are guides for us. Instead of being child-centered and finding out what children want to learn. And there is a wonderful framework called the responsive classroom. And during the first 6 weeks of school, one of the things that you ask the children, what do you want to learn this year? And in the responsive classroom, the children make up the rules because you're teaching them what civic engagement is. And so you start with the children's hopes and dreams for the year. What are your hopes and dreams? What do you hope to accomplish this year? And then you ask the children, based on your hopes and dreams, what rules do we need in this classroom in order for you to realize your hopes and dreams? So the children are contributing to the democracy of the classroom, to the governance of the classroom. But there are rules, and you know, I go in classrooms where there are about 10 rules posted. Young children only need 3 to 4 rules that cover a host of sins, as I tell teachers. You know, they're broad enough. Be kind, be respectful. I mean, they're simple, and the teacher sort of guides the rulemaking, but there is the first level of civic engagement just by allowing children to first express their hopes and dreams. I hope to learn the alphabet this year. I hope to learn my numbers. I hope to write my name. Now we have some buy-in. You understand? Now we have kids saying what they want to learn. Then you can teach them whatever else you want to teach them, but that initial interaction, that's how you create place, space, and grace.
So going back to the book and the importance of and getting the idea of what children want. I have a feeling that there's a lot of limitations on, it's gonna be tied to money. Do teachers have access and the ability to grow their libraries each year? How does that happen? How does that look? To get what they need for their classrooms as they shift through. So I don't know the answer to this. I'm asking it. I don't know if there's a limitation, like how could we assist in that process?
I'm gonna let the district expert.
Part of the budget cycle is having them request that. So I think I mentioned this earlier, maybe in one of the subcommittee meetings, that this year, the middle school teachers, the LA teachers asked for new classroom libraries. So we gave them money for that. We have given the elementary teachers in the past money, but honestly, there should be money in every budget cycle for them to upgrade their library. Good teachers, especially teachers who are veterans and have acquired a lot of reading material, will often do what Maurice is suggesting and cycle their classroom library so that it motivates interest. So maybe I put out shark books and then I take them away and I put out another topic. And often we do interest inventories with the kids in really all grades. That should happen, not just the little ones, to see what they're interested in, because obviously I can do exactly what he's saying and tailor what I'm putting out to the interests of the kids.
How do we help our new teachers build their libraries?
Oh, that should be part of what they get when they come in the door, not just, now, a lot of the curriculum materials come with library materials, and that's part of the conversation we're having right now, actually. But again, a new teacher compared to a veteran teacher who's had maybe 20 years to acquire literally thousands of books. We can't do that right from the get-go, and I'm not sure you should buy it all at once anyway.
No.
But there should be something for them to start with.
Yeah, and so this year we have quite a few new elementary school teachers start. Did we help them in supporting them, and did we help them?
They have curriculum materials. I don't know what they inherited in terms of classroom libraries, because those were existing positions.
I think it's important to find that out.
Sure, we can do that.
So I'm curious about in Washington, DC, which is where I live. The library will prepare books for teachers if they request them. In addition to what they have in their classrooms, they can get books from the library, which is another, because we want teachers who are resourceful as
Yes.
well.
But you're talking about in our own school library.
No, in the public school, public library.
Okay, well, I'm sure that could be arranged.
No, I'm just putting that out as as a possibility.
Yeah.
The thing about books that are often associated with curriculum, they often do not get to what you're asking about. And so you do have to supplement. And teachers are always supplementing. We look at the out-of-pocket expenses of teachers and it's significant over time. So the books are one part of the dynamics of a classroom. And children need access to early literacy experiences that are developmentally appropriate. Because that's how they start their emerging reading, by first just turning pages and making up the story. It has nothing to do with but they make up their stories. And that makes them feel that's their first efforts at reading.
Jen wants to, you and you, Jen?
Oh, yeah, maybe she can have it set up that she can unmute herself.
So, sorry, I was trying to ask, when I was reading your book, you talked about, what does it look like actually in classrooms I guess it's a little bit of a DEI, but more so than that is, how do you provide for kids to make sure that you give them a level playing field? Like how do you see that looks like in a early childhood in an early childhood classroom?
And when you say a level playing field, you mean how do we create equity in classrooms?
Correct.
Okay. So, this is going to sound a little bit trite, but I talked about it earlier today. Good early childhood practices and programs take care of the equity issue. What we do not have consistently across school districts are high quality classrooms for all children. And there's a new book out by a group of researchers, and it's called Segregation by Experiences. And what the researchers say is that when they go to schools, early childhood programs, for privileged children, where privileged children go to school, and where they go look at schools from under-resourced communities, because the real issue is resources, that there's a difference. And the difference is it's more span and control in the under-resourced communities and more open-ended, engaging, inquiry-based, imagination, problem-solving, language development in programs that are serving privileged children. So the equity issue is to make sure that all children have access to that high-quality program. Questions or comments about that? That's pretty provocative, isn't it?
They have to change the way the schools are funded. If you really want to provide equity across for all, you have to change the fund.
That's one consideration. What else do we have to change?
You have to change mindsets.
Mindsets. And what would be the mindset in this equity-focused classroom? What would be one of the mindsets?
Well, in the classroom where we have a control aspect, there is likely a sense that if I give the freedom, I won't be able to manage the behaviors.
True. So one mindset is that all, and that's in caps, children can learn at high levels. That's the first mindset, to believe that there are geniuses in all 15, 18, 20 children, and there is the genius. So all children can learn at high levels. Go ahead.
It's funny that you say that because I'm speaking with parents and not just hen hud parents, parents in general. It seems like there's a mentality of once a student has become part of a special education program, it's like, okay, we're gonna put this student here and we're gonna, obviously they have their own education goals, but they become treated very different,
True that.
right?
I used to say that SPED was like the no roach hotel. The roaches check in and they never check out. I mean, that you stay in that milieu, in that venue, and people's attitudes toward you. You know, the big thing is, and I'm not making fun, it's just that people think that all children, what teachers tell me now, I think he's on the spectrum. And I say, we're all on the spectrum. I mean, this is just language. We all have disabilities. We're all on the spectrum. And the labeling of children is one of the most detrimental things we can do, to box children in. And no one is the same forever. You know, if we understand development, and that's why when we're looking at young children, 3 to 5, we talk about non-categorical, because development is such, a child might look like this now, and as they get older and develop, that which we thought was a disability is no longer a disability. But to ignore, I mean, if a teacher says, I have a concern about Maurice, then I want to know what it is. And then I want to know what is the presenting behavior. So there's too many people who are just willing to accept that the child has a problem. And I do child study with teachers and principals. What is the presenting behavior? Does he open the door and hurl a block across the room, knocking down 3 children? No. Well, what does he do? And then what does he do well? Because we have a lot of what kids can't do or what they do that is a challenge. But what does he do well? And I think that parents and teachers and leaders have to ask the same question.
But that's a part of the professional development aspect of it, right? Is that if teachers are continuously learning all of the new techniques, the things that they should see, the studies that are done, and they're constantly doing that improvement on themselves, right? It gives them the ability to actually educate our children in a new way, right? Maybe a way they didn't see last year,
Right.
but they took this course and wow, that opened my eyes because I didn't teach this way before. But now I just learned another technique I could apply to maybe a child that has a certain issue and see what the response and the feedback is. So I think that's a critical piece as
And
well.
that is a policy piece that requires money and time. If you're going to do it right, you need money and time. Money to bring forward whatever kind of professional development, and time for teachers to learn, to understand, to practice, and to reflect. And I know it's a challenge to create time for teachers, but you'll never get to where you want to go if you don't provide the time for teachers for professional development and training. And more is better than less. And I know it's always a challenge around time, but we'll never get to where we want to be with children if we don't take the time to train the teachers and provide them time for learning, practice, and reflection. Those are the 3. Learn, practice, and reflect. Yes.
So are you suggesting maybe that it's the lack of PD that the teachers in these early childhood programs in the districts that are not, or in the environments that are not encouraging this conversational methodology of learning? It's a lack of professional development is really the differential.
Yes, and I'm going to go on and say some more about that. So one of the foundations which I've brought up in the 2 previous presentations are the New York State Early Learning Standards. And the standards tell us what children are to know, understand, and be able to do when they enter kindergarten. And I have observed, I've only been here one day, I have observed that people are not familiar with the early learning standards, and that drives what we do. And I've talked about unpacking the standards. So the first training that I would provide would be to train, to unpack the standards, to make sure that all early childhood teachers, not only pre-K, but kindergarten teachers too, because oftentimes kindergarten teachers have unrealistic expectations about what kids are. When they talk to me, they want them to do this, and I say, and so what are you gonna do all year if they come to you knowing all that? I mean, we should maximize what children, but there is a span of knowledge that kids can cover. And so that's a good example. I don't know if there's been district-wide training on the New York State early learning standards. It hasn't been apparent to me in my interactions by briefing that.
I actually learned a little bit about that through my child's preschool, because here in Henhud, I don't know how much you know, but UPK is new to us.
Right.
We introduced it last school year and we have it again this school year, but it's for a very small population. So while we're here, can I ask you
Sure.
your perspective on UPK, and is it something that should be rolled out across all students? What is the benefit of that? What happens to the children that aren't accessing the same educational benefits? Can you
Sure,
elaborate?
and that's a nice segue into my
Good.
PowerPoint presentation.
We didn't
So,
practice that.
yes, but it's good, you're good. Can we go to the first slide? So here we have, and you have the presentation. When we invest wisely in children and families, the next generation will pay that back through a lifetime of productivity and responsible citizenship. So early childhood, pre-K, is an investment in the future. And it contributes to three things. School achievement, if children get the right foundation, and that's where we have to work through the thorny issue. So school achievement, workforce development, because if these children stay in school and do well, they will once become, or will eventually become, workers in our community. And they also contribute to the economic vitality of your community because they will be tax-paying citizens. And so we discussed earlier today, we either invest on the front end or we invest on the back end, which is dependency on all kinds of subsidies, food. And you know, the incarceration rate is comparable. We look at the low literacy level of people who are incarcerated, and it's low. And you know, if there had been a place, space, and grace for them. So to answer your question, I believe in universal pre-K. We have it in Washington, DC, and it is not means tested. Any parent of a 3 and 4-year-old has free universal pre-K. Anyway, not based on income or anything like that. So I believe in it because what we know is that 90% of the brain is developed in the early years of life. And so and we know a lot around neuroscience, how the brain functions, to know that children who are from stimulating, engaging, awe and wonderment environments succeed in school and in life. And the difference is that all children are not getting the same dosage. And that's what leads to the inequity. So there are core concepts of development and you have them in front of you, so I'm not going to read them to you. But child development is a foundation for community development. So if we invest in our children early, we will get the return in the community. All aspects of adult human capital, from workforce skills to cooperative and lawful behavior, build on the capacities that are developed during the early years. So this is the foundational work that we're doing here. Any question about that concept?
Not about the concept.
Okay.
Since we don't offer it to everybody, aren't we basically promoting inequity within our own district,
Thank you. Well, here's what I say about that. We have to start somewhere.
right?
And better that your school district started with small numbers because there's a lot of learning. I mean, we don't want to mess up too many kids, but no. So there is a research and development aspect to any new undertaking. And so the real question is not how many we serve, what can we learn about while they're doing this? What can we learn about how to do this? I mean, we raised the issue of the investment of professional development time and money. That is key because without it, teachers can't. So I wouldn't worry so much about how many children we're serving. Are we serving the children we're serving well? Are we doing a good job? That's the basic question. So the core concepts of development, so the second concept is brains are built over time. And so children in the research, children who are not in stimulating environments, when they look at their brains, when they look like someone with Alzheimer's, because the stimulation, these synapses, and I don't want to get into, because I'll get lost in the mix, but children are building structure, and the more stimulation they get, the more they develop in their brain. Their cognitive development grows with their brain. But if children are told to sit down and shut up, which would never happen in this school district, but if children are told that repeatedly, then there's not much stimulation going on. Kids need interesting things to do. That is just that simple. And we need to teach teachers how to create interesting environments. So the third concept is the interactive influences of genes and experiences literally shape the architecture of the developing brain. That's really what I was saying in garbled speech, but it is that the stimulation is influenced by the experiences that children have. And the first and most important one is the quality of relationships. Children, so there is the core theory of success, and it says that the quality of relationships contributes to the quality of thinking, which contributes to the quality of action, which contributes to the quality of results. So if we want to have high quality results, we need to have high quality relationships between teachers and students. What do you think about that?
Can you elaborate a little bit on a high quality relationship? Because I'm thinking, oh, all my kids have wonderful relationships with their teachers. Can you kind of?
Well, tell me how you know that. I'm not challenging.
No, yeah, just because they're happy, they're growing, they're making progress, they enjoy their days, you know.
And what do you think contributed to that on the teacher's part?
Them giving my child what they needed, getting on their level, looking at their needs as a student. So I'm finding it.
Yeah, that's I'm skillful.
I like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but not every one of our children comes home every day feeling like that. You know, there's a lot of children that go home every day and aren't happy and, you know, aren't feeling like they're getting what they need, or they're crying, or whatever that looks like. So I think I think teachers connect with, it's just natural human nature, connect with, and it's easier for them to connect with certain kids, maybe the kids that maybe cause them a little bit of a behavioral issues a little differently, and how they manage their classrooms. I mean, my kids have always had great teachers, but there's always going to be the days they come home and they're, you know.
Well, sure, that's the nature. I mean, if kids didn't complain, why would, but, you know, I think that, you know, teachers tell me they like all their children. I don't know that. I didn't like all the children I thought, but can you fake it?
I was gonna say
Can you fake it?
that's the important
That's
piece of
the
being a
important thing.
teacher. We're both teachers, and I think for me, like when I'm in a classroom, every child, like it's like you're acting almost at times,
Well, it is.
and you have to make every child feel like they are the most important child in the room, even though there's 20 something of them, but each child should feel like they are your favorite. They are the most important person in the room. And I think that's what we need to promote within our teachers, is making sure those 20 something students all feel they are the favorite, they are worthy, they are special, and they belong in that room. And that we are meeting them where they are with the needs that they have.
Even if they get on your last nerve. And you can even say that, because, you know, you're working that one nerve I got left, you know? Kids understand a lot, and they understand dishonesty too. They know when a teacher is a fraud. And some kids, even young children, will call you on it. They'll tell you, that's not fair. You know, that's not right. And so when children say to me, I like my teacher, I say, why do you like? Because she's nice, she's fair, she lets us play. You know, those are the indicators. So if children, and everyone has a bad day. Imagine, everyone has a bad day. So do children consistently come home and they're not happy? Then we have a problem.
And then what do we do to help those children? And I'm gonna ask, I don't know if it's appropriate, but it just popped into my mind, because I know you had the teachers this morning with you. How did they react to this? Like, was there a conversation around this with them? Because I'm curious about their perspective on this, because
On which part?
I guess how they feel about, do they have enough? What happens when they have a bad day? You know, dealing with the classroom management, what the kids' needs are. Do they have what they need to do that?
I was gonna ask the same thing, because I think that the amount of energy that goes into making 150 kids feel special is draining. So do they have time to relax and to reflect so they are not burnt out? Because if the teacher's burnt out in front of your child, they're never going to build those relationships. Do we have space here for the teachers?
So one of the
All
things that, you know, we blame everything on the pandemic, and I'm old enough to know the song Blame It on the Bossa Nova. But many of these conditions existed before the pandemic, and teachers were burned out before the pandemic. I mean, this burnout has been going on for a long time. What we have not paid enough attention to as an educational establishment is the emotional well-being
Yes.
of teachers. We've been told, suck it in. You know, that's what you signed up for. And so now we are paying more attention to teacher well-being. There are assessments, there are schools that give teachers a break. You know, there's a big movement to a 4-day work week for teachers. And we are now just realizing, because no one wants to teach anymore. That's part of the problem. There is a shortage, a national shortage of teachers. Teachers are saying, you can take this job and do whatever you want to do with it. I'm not here anymore. So there is the realization that we have to pay as much attention to the social emotional being status of teachers as we do to children. And so that's an emerging issue in the field.
Not just teachers too. I want to put all staff in that because they're all drained, they're overtaxed.
I know, but I don't want to overpromise.
I wouldn't promise either, but I just want to make sure.
But you know, one of the things that sometimes in education improvement we do, we want to take in the universe. If we can save some teachers from good teachers, some people, you know, I always say about burnout, you know, first of all, you have to have been on fire at some point in your career. So you can't burn out if you've never been on fire. So some folks need to go home because it's time. But our good teachers, we're losing them as well. And we need to figure out what to do to hold them in place. But first, we have to take care of the children. You know, first we have to take care of the children and make sure we're giving them a rich, robust early learning experience. So we've been through the core concepts of development. But I do want us to pay attention to these principles of ideal learning environments because they draw from the best in the field of early childhood education. And they're drawn from approaches including Montessori, Reggio Emilia in Italy, which are considered the best infant, toddler, and preschools in the world. People travel from all over the world to see these programs. Friends Center for Children, Tools of the Mind, which I understand you're using in one of your elementary schools, Bank Street College of Education and the Waldorf School. So these principles of ideal learning draw from multiple sources in terms of what is best quality. And so to our equity issue, the first principle is that decision-making reflects a commitment to equity. first and foremost, that in all our decisions, we have to ask ourselves, is this providing equity? And that has to do with the quality of programs that we put in place. The second one is that children construct knowledge from diverse experiences to make meaning of the world. And that means that we have to consider a child. So when we talk about developmentally appropriate practices, we're talking about what is age appropriate. What's appropriate for a child that age? What is individual appropriate? Because all children are different. And what is culturally appropriate? And that's something we miss out on. And because things that are in one culture may not be valued in another culture. And I just had a discussion with some men in early childhood education. There was a discussion about, should little boys be allowed to cry? What do you think?
Yes.
They should be, yes.
Why?
Because they have to show their emotion. They have to be able to express themselves when they're sad. There's nothing wrong with crying. I think that's a big part of an issue with society, right? Men are not supposed to cry. They're supposed to have these tough exteriors. And I've noticed that in a lot of Black households, that's one of the things. You're supposed to be strong. You're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to express yourself. And that's a big part of why a lot of men hold a lot of things in, and they go through life in that phase where they feel like they can't express themselves because they're not allowed to be sad. They're supposed to be strong. And I think that's a big part of like just what we do in the early years of letting kids know that this is a safe place. You can express yourself however you feel and know that you're still being heard. So it transitions throughout your life, honestly.
I'm gonna say a little bit about cultural awareness. I'm Russian, and neither boys or girls were supposed to cry. It's a sign of weakness. So I can tell you right now, the way that I grew up, crying, even to this day, makes me uncomfortable and makes me extremely uncomfortable in a public place. Showing that sign of weakness. So I think there's a cultural awareness here that we have to be, like, just because I think it's okay, another child might have been brought up differently. Not that it's a good or a bad thing.
No. I was just gonna say that I'm from the West Indies. I came here when I was 16 years old. I spoke broken English. People didn't understand me for a very long period of time, but that's a part of also our culture. Men are not supposed to cry. That's not really, you're not allowed to cry, same thing. So it's a cultural thing. And I think once teachers understand that they're dealing with a variety of different kids in their classroom, and we understand that their reactions are going to be different, having the tools to learn how to deal with them and address them and how to help them is key. So I think that's a big part of it too.
A cultural confidence.
Yes, absolutely.
But how do you tell a 3-year-old they can't cry?
You don't. I don't know, but my parents somehow did it to me.
Yeah, well, listen, we could teach a monkey how to read, but what is the most appropriate thing is it not a part of development that young children express emotions by crying, by yelling, so when we impose our adult views, and what I had to say to the men I was in, there's a lot of urban legends and folk tales about children, but I'm talking about development, the principles of development and how children. I'm not so sure, to your point, that telling young men, boys, children, infants and toddlers and preschoolers not to cry, I'm not sure this is just my theory, so that repressed emotion manifests itself in unsocial behaviors later on, and because that expression of feeling were not. So young adults, and we have a major murder and mayhem problem in Washington, DC. I'm not so sure that those kids did not only, they may have gone to a great preschool, and that's why the continuity of early childhood has to go beyond pre-K. Because children can have a wonderful experience in pre-K, And then there's the story of a teacher who said, a kindergarten teacher who said to the children, okay, last year you were in pre-K and you played around, and here we take care of business. That message to children is a strong negative message. And so it's not just the pre-K teachers we have to pay attention to. We have to pay attention to kindergarten, first grade, second grade. The continuum goes up, but if kids are not having the same rich experiences during their early years, it won't work.
I think also, one of the beauties of what we're doing tonight is that this is open to our entire community. I know we are focusing on our schools, and I know we're focusing on our leaders and our teachers. But I think a lot of these messages are also important for our families in general at home. Like one of the things you just said about like imposing adult views. I feel like that happens a lot here, where as adults, we all have feelings and we project them onto the children. And then we make the children have these views, like just going back to the crying, you're not allowed to cry. Like, it's just a thing. We project that onto children so that they stay bottled in and they don't want to do this, and they're gonna do exactly what you say. And I know we're talking about, like we said, our teachers, like we have to make sure they're not doing that. I think it's such a great thing right now that we are opening this up to the public, and that you had a session with parents before, so that we can change as a community and really come together with everything that you are saying.
So one of the things that we talk about, and I don't believe in readiness, because children come into the world ready to learn, but that is popular to talk about school readiness. And it cannot be just the children. So to your point, we talk about ready children, ready schools, and ready families and communities, because it takes all three to make it happen for children. So we, as a school district, have a responsibility to listen to parents and to communicate with parents. And so it is, which is different from broadcasting to parents. Understanding where they're coming from, what they're saying. We can't do everything that people want us to do, but we can listen, and we can do some of the things that people ask us to do. But we cannot do it without families and community, because the community writ large, whether they have children in the school or not, need to understand what's going on and what their tax dollars are supporting. So we have a responsibility to inform, engage, and communicate with all. So principle 3, which just warms the hearts of early childhood educators, and that is play is an essential element of young children's learning. And play throughout their experience, not just in pre-K, but there are different ways of playing. And games are playing. There are different forms of playing, but play is important to children's social emotional development, their cognitive development, because when you play games, you make rules. And making rules is a part of critical thinking. And so, play is, I say it's a dirty 4-letter word in many school districts, but play is critical to children's development.
So I haven't had a kindergartner in 10 years, so it's a long time, but 10 years ago, and then 13 years ago, with my other child, I feel like kindergarten was not play-based. Here at Hendrick Hudson, they sat a lot of the time in a chair, as 5-year-olds, and my children are both young 5-year-olds, it was not easy for them. Have we changed how kindergarten looks for them? And I thought it's been 10, 13 years, I have no idea. I don't even know if my daughter's kindergarten classroom had a kitchen in it. My son's did. I don't know if my daughter's did. I don't know when she played in school. That's maybe on me as a parent. But I always assumed in kindergarten you played, but we expect, like you said, readiness. They should be reading out of kindergarten. They should know their basic math out of kindergarten. Like, we put a lot of pressure on the teachers and the kids in that way. So, and this is just my take and my experience. How can we bring that into the classroom? So that the kids are learning to read and they're learning to know numbers and they're getting that play experience and the socialization and everything else. It's a tall order.
But a skillful teacher is able to do that.
Thank you.
A skillful teacher can have children dictate a story about what you just did. Do you want to write a story about what you, so it's not either or, it's both and. But you have to have teachers who have a disposition. You know, some people, they don't want sand tables in the classroom. They don't want water. It's too messy for the custodian. I mean, teachers tell me all kinds of things. But what about the kids? You know, so it is, we need teachers who have, and we have to provide training for them, how to facilitate play. That is a skill.
I also think one of the things that was a beauty, and you mentioned like that one kid had a kitchen, one didn't. One of the things that we put in one of the schools is a kitchen. And I'm a big proponent of that because it's an area to play. Different lessons they can do in there, drawing the pictures, making the food. Like when you mentioned that, that's what I was thinking too, is there's an area of play. What else can we put into our buildings to encourage that kind of play where the kids are being creative, the kids are hands-on, the kids are not sitting at that desk? I think we really need to look at as a district, what is it that we want our kids to be doing besides sitting there, and what do we have already in place, and what else do we think is important to invest in for that?
So
That's
here's
why I love the
what
kitchen.
told me about, so the kitchen is dramatic play. That's what it's called in the profession.
You're
But
talking about fake, I'm talking about fake kids.
I'm talking about the real kitchen.
well, it doesn't,
Kindergarten.
it doesn't matter whether it's fake or real. That's not what
Okay.
the purpose
I was
is.
just wondering.
The purpose is for children to explore the possibilities. What concerns me is that the dramatic play remains the same throughout the year. And it should change over time. If we're now studying animals, then it becomes a vet shop. And a skillful teacher knows how to transition and transform that space. So we might start off with it in the beginning of the year as a dramatic play, but I make teachers mandate the teachers change that space, and it should reflect what is our theme. So here again, training teachers on how to do this becomes a matter of priority, money, and time. The money to train them.
It also requires all of the administrators to be on the same page, because we've sometimes had conversations where other people felt strongly that that should not be present. So how do we get ourselves on the same, it's a little easier now because they're with one principal as opposed to spread
Sure.
across 3 schools.
But I think the board is also raising a very important policy issue, which is, are we a play-based early childhood school district? That's a major policy
I
issue.
would tell you as a parent that has an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old, that I never felt like Hendrick Hudson was a play-based learning environment.
So my question is, moving forward, do you want to be a play-based?
I was just gonna say that my experience in kindergarten for my son, who's 8 now, was completely different. The teacher he had, it was during COVID. Kids were scared to be in school, but this was his first classroom experience, and she took them outside. She did hikes with them. They picked up rocks. They learned how to count that way. They subtracted things from their little hikes that they did around PV. That was a part of her teaching them math. And my son enjoyed that because it wasn't work. It wasn't, I'm learning how to count. It was just, I'm doing something fun. We're exploring out here, man. One day it'll be leaves, one day it's rocks, then it's sticks. And then she did like Play-Doh in the classroom, and he enjoyed that class tremendously. Like he loved every aspect of it. He loved going to school. During COVID, he was like, I want to go to school. And I think that was important, but I think that speaks to each teacher and how they're teaching, right? And I think the big component here is that we have to be consistent across the district so that every child is getting that same, the equity issue. They're all getting that same experience across the district as they go through our learning.
And I want to withdraw play-based because play has a bad connotation. I want to say inquiry-based.
Yeah.
Inquiry-based.
free. I was, well,
that includes play, but
if you, well, you're talking, see, I think there's a big difference between like a kindergarten experience and like a second grade experience and third grade experience. And what those teachers do to keep the kids' interest and keep them engaged is a lot different. So, you know, as children develop, that shifts based on who the teacher is, what the experience is, what the curriculum is. But from an early childhood, like K1 experience or pre-K K1, I don't know if we have, I don't know I've been at it too long. I
Right.
don't know what that looks like here. I don't know, you know, what are the values? What are the teachers doing? I don't really know what that looks like.
and that's what we call continuity of instruction. And so the question might be, the policy question is, do we have continuity of instruction? And is it based on solid principles of child development? That inquiry would get you to concluding what you want. Because it sounds like it's a
How
little
would we
bit of,
find that out?
ask your people, ask your superintendent. I mean,
Because there's, I mean, each of them has freedom in their classroom to teach the way that their style and what they,
we
right?
always allow them to do that, but there is a approach that is this school district's approach to teaching and learning, and that's what you want everyone. You can use your own, to a certain extent, you can use your own imagination and creativity. But do we see joyful learning going on when we go in the classroom? That's the real question. Are children engaged? Not sitting still, not attempting to do cursive writing or some.
I hope so. I don't know.
My experience, I've seen that from, my children are younger, I'm on the younger child end of it. And I know my kindergartner last year, when he was learning, they were allowed, when they were on the carpet or doing their activity, when they were done, it wasn't you stay here and wait for everyone else to finish. They were able to go up and they had centers in the room, and I'm pretty sure when we did site visits, most had the centers. He was allowed to go and then pick something from a center that he wanted to be able to work on independent, and they knew the routine, they knew the structure. So he was able to go and move on to the next activity when he was done, while everyone else was getting
Done doing what?
whatever the activity the whole class was supposed to finish at that time, whatever was their intended standard or target for the day, or that time. When they were done, when he was completed, he was able to move on to another activity while the others were.
So that is,
were still going.
that is called choice
Yes.
as a reward. But it's not, because that child, your child, should be able to do that anyway. That should be a natural part of the day, not till I finish what the teacher.
Or I'm going based on.
I don't know,
what I don't know if that was what was actually
let me
happening
just
in the
say
room,
this.
but I know there was choice in the room, and there were centers in the room. That I do know, so it wasn't sitting in a seat all day.
However, as you describe it, it was choice after you did.
Potentially,
Okay,
I don't know, I don't wanna.
so let me just clarify what is choice. Choice is children come in the classroom after we have our group meeting, and they can sign up or choose what center they want to go to. Then there are some children who need some work, need to learn something. Then you say, you three, you need to come with me. Because everyone doesn't need, and I'm not saying this about your child.
And
I'm saying
that could vary, I'm going based on what my
I'm
child's
just explaining a
interpretation of
concept
that
of
was.
high quality early childhood program. And simply, choice is choice. Some teachers say, when you finish that, you can have choice. Some teachers say, you can choose. Some of you I'm gonna have to pull because I want to work with you. So I'm just trying to make the distinction between the different. If you're gonna be a high quality, inquiry-based, play-based school district. And leaders have to be able to distinguish between those things.
So I will share that years ago, I was started out as a kindergarten preschool, public kindergarten. The very first, I was hired, I think the day before school started. It was an emergency leave of absence, and so I took over kindergarten class. And my principal, knowing that I was brand new, having come out of a private preschool setting, bought me a book called Joyful Learning by Bobby Fischer. And I learned how to run my classroom through a choice board. I remember explaining that at parent night and having people look at me like I was insane, that I was going to give kids choices and they would manage their day. And I have to tell you, for all the years I taught kindergarten, I never had a kid miss a day. I never had a kid miss a center. The kids at lunchtime would look at the choice board and they'd remind each other of what activities remain. And that is exactly how we functioned. We pulled the kids in groups based on what they needed from us at the moment. Both had a marvelous full-time teaching assistant who was my right hand. But those were some of my favorite years. And I was blessed to have a lot of those kids again later in fourth grade. So, but that is, to overuse the word, a joyful way to work with children. And I would argue it can be done at any age if you have that disposition as a teacher.
And if you believe in the children.
Yep.
If you believe, this is all about believing in children.
Yep.
And of course they mess up from time to time, but that's about growing, developing.
Yep.
But is this classroom going to go totally out of control? Because that's what most teachers are concerned about. If I let up, if I give them choice or freedom, so they have to follow my rules, they didn't create them, I created them. And so all of these are provocations for us to think about as a school district. You know, one conversation, someone said, well, there are no right or wrong answers. I don't know, there are right and wrong answers when it comes to children and what we know about the science of learning and what we know about how children grow and develop. There are good ways and not so good ways. There are some bad ways too. On the principle number 3, Clay, we did that. 4 is instruction is personalized. This is how we talk about individualized or understanding the child. It's personalized to acknowledge each child's developmental abilities. Their development abilities, they all go through the same phases of development, but they go through them at different times. So all children are not at the same place at the same time. I talked about panda bears earlier today. Number 5, the teacher is a guide, nurturing presence and co-constructor of knowledge that we co-construct with children. It's not just me as the sage on the stage, I'm the guide on the side, and I work in tandem with children to construct knowledge. 6, young children and adults learn through relationships. The core theory of success, the quality of the relationship. If you're in relationship, and those of you who are teachers in here know this, if you're in relationship with children, they'll do anything you ask them to do. Is that true? They will.
And they will defend you 1000% against anyone who is not doing the expectations of the classroom. And if you have everything set up, they will call the other students out if they are not doing what you want them to do.
Yeah, and they say, she said, they call her she said that we're not supposed to do that. She said, yeah, they will call other children out. Principle 7 is the time of childhood is valued. In other words, it's not frivolous. We have to be intentional about what we do with children and how we engage them. Because childhood, as I'm learning, as I'm aging, is not infinite. It's finite. Children are only 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for a period of time. And then so, unfortunately. And then continuous learning environments.
Everybody to tears.
Yeah.
Oh, you young. Continuous support, learning environments, support adult development. And that goes back to professional development. That people have to be continuously learning, practicing, and reflecting. And that, my dear friends, is my presentation, questions or comments, which you may go throughout, but any closing questions or comments that you have. Or what I like to do is to go around the table and your one takeaway from our discussion this evening. Starting with your one takeaway, then.
My God, I have a million great notes. What's my favorite?
Your one takeaway,
I'll start.
okay.
So huge for me, and I don't think we've done this here in our decision making, and it's always been it's always top of mind for me, but something that we really need to practice is this providing equity is a question. We have to always answer that question when we're not us as a board, even necessarily, but just as a school district, as people, right? Or that's a very.
Putting equity at the center of all decision making, okay. Another takeaway,
I was gonna say that what you started off with, talking about how only in schools do we separate people by age and their ability or disability, whichever way you wanna look at it.
next, your one takeaway,
That we stifle children. And that what we stifle, some of the characteristics that we stifle could be their gifts.
Mhm.
That hits home for me as a teacher too,
Okay.
so.
Next,
I think one thing I learned is just, I think the driving force of our district needs to be equity, obviously for our kids, but also just that sense of belonging and just the DEI overall in understanding every child and being able to give them the things that they need to help them to learn as they continue to go through the school process, right? And just be the greatest thing they can be, if we give them the opportunity, right? And that starts with our leaders understanding that and the importance of that and making sure that we do policies that reflect that,
Mhm.
but also all the other things that come with it, the curriculum, the training. It's a multitude of things together.
let's just go around and we'll come back,
I don't want to forget Jen.
okay,
I don't.
next, next,
He's not, I think Amelia, have to go to.
Oh, wait, we got Jen.
Yeah, Jen's on. Go
Want me to
ahead.
do it? Oh, so I guess, just when we make decisions and we think about what we want our classrooms to look like and what we want, how we base things up, just look at from the student's eye, the child's eye, not from our viewpoint.
okay. Next,
That children should be the ones who are contributing to the classroom. I love your I hope statements that you would have the children make. And all children can learn at high levels.
next,
I like the point you made about professional development and how we can work with our teachers to help them better work with our students. Not just about the curriculum that they're teaching, but maybe about the process and the approach to teaching.
Mr. Superintendent.
I had a few
You think you wrote a novel?
No, I did, because I was getting all these things that I'm trying to keep.
I want book rights stuff.
And I sort of go back to the same thing, the PD pieces, and I was trying to think of how to do that, because when our staff thinks of PD, they don't think of it this way. It's always like, what do I have to learn now? What's new, what's being put on me? And what we're trying to do is really build on their skill set and try to push them maybe to another area, another way of thinking and doing it.
What about Enrique, Benita, Margaret, anything?
Well, I'll say for myself, how do I keep reading this? I will say for myself that you brought me back to my roots today, and I have thoroughly enjoyed all three conversations. So I'm going back to pre-K. I've been hearing the sense and belonging with the students. I like how you put it, the space, the place, and the place. That's just something I think everybody needs to hear.
By coincidence, today the Wall Street Journal had an article about education in Venezuela. It just made me think how lucky we are here, because the article, and I recommend everyone to read it, was talking how poorly the classrooms are and everything, but the worst part of education is that teachers don't show up because they get paid between $6 and $10 a month, and they can only get to the classroom a couple of days a week, because then they need to go out and find
Another
how
job.
to make a living.
Mm.
So listening to everything that we have here today and what you explained and compare it to other countries, that's shocking.
So we're lucky.
I would say yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me.
I had a quick question. I just wanted to ask, in your book, you talk about the path of least resistance in there. And what is that? Can you speak a little bit more about that? I know we didn't really touch on it, but I just wanted to ask.
Well, you know, there is low hanging fruit in leadership. And sometimes we try to take on too much. And so there's going to be resistance, trust me, no matter what you do. And there's always going to be people who do not agree. And to be a leader, you have to be courageous. And that's the last chapter in the book. And it takes courage to be a board. It takes courage to make policy. Everyone does not always agree with the decision, but decisions have to be made. And if we keep children at the center of our decision-making, we can't go wrong. People may not agree, but if we say, so the path of least resistance is in part keeping clear about our purpose, our aims, and our mission. And if we're here to serve children, what does the data, what does the research tell us about what we're trying to do? I don't know if that answers your question, but it makes me feel good.
It's it.
So this is my third year on the board. And what I love most about this group here is that we always come back to, well, what's best for the kids? It's at the center of every decision. And as I'm sure you may know, part of our time with you and education with you is to help us make a decision in December based on the elementary school model here, which obviously ties into all that you taught us about early childhood.
Right.
And development and the setup of education. I want to ask you, in your opinion, are there certain grade levels that should be together? How many years is ideal to be together? And do you, from what you know of HUD and our changes in the structure, do you have a professional opinion?
Well, I always have an opinion, but yeah, I do. So what we know is that the continuum of early childhood is birth to 8. So that is the framework for early childhood education. National Association for Education of Children is about birth to age 8. There are a number of considerations. So if I had my brothers, children would stay with the same teacher, but I'm not gonna go there. Because I've been born not to go there. But the span would be, and because of your facilities and the consideration of finance, it would be pre-K, K1, or pre-K, K1-2. There's continuity of instruction. It's children staying with their cohort. It's moving, it's professional development. So I would, in my professional opinion, that is the span. There's too much movement there. Too many transitions. Now I'm going back to Washington, so you don't know where I'm going when I leave here, but I mean, that's my best thinking.
I guess my question is it, if you're keeping cohorts together and they're moving, is there a way for us to make those transitions less, I guess, less impactful almost, right? Like if we were to stay in the model we're in right now, right? Which is what we have, which the kids are 2 grades, they're in second and third are together, right? And then they move to.
So I'm recommending pre-K, K, and 1.
Okay, pre-K, K, and 1.
That's what I'm recommending.
We have pre-K K1 right now, then we have a 2-3, and then we have a 4-5.
And that's necessary. That, I mean, in my opinion, because it goes to the issue of equity. And so if we have, I don't know how many elementary schools you have, three.
But
Do you know how the series of events went? I don't know how much history you have here or dialogue, but it was community schools, K-5, zoned by location where you lived. Then we switched to Princeton Plan and it was K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've added in 36 seats of UPK. So we don't have pre-K, K1. We have K1 with a tiny little bit of pre-K, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So what is your capacity? I have to ask the superintendent that.
Well, that's what I said earlier today. So I actually made a statement that I committed the board to because she said to me, in the next budget cycle, we need to try to capture all of the pre-K. And I said, we need to look at the model and whether we can capture it all internally, which would be ideal. And what would the cost be? Again, applying the 5,400 we get per student into our own as opposed to through, what do we call them, vendor, whatever, they're not vendors.
Collaborators.
Thank you.
See, I even learned. about
No, I
it.
misrepresented. So that was what I said. And the question then becomes which configuration as we look at them fits. And so like if you do pre-K to 1, we may then be short, not filling a whole building. We go to pre-K to 2, we might go over. So it's how do you find the balance so that we best utilize our 3 schools? And that's the number. I think that's what's going to have to get teased out as we settle on what do we think the configuration should be.
I mean,
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in thinking about just the equity piece that you spoke about. Earlier in the summer, we were tasked with kids are gonna have 30 kids in a class in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, right?
No, it was not 30.
Well, not 30.
It was
It was-
close to 30. It was 23.
Okay, so everybody talked about it being overcrowded, right? There was a lot of things going back and forth about that. And in the span of 2 weeks, right, with the grade banding that we have, our board, everybody that sat at this table, were able to just say, hey, let's, with the advice of Dr. Lauro, let's add another section. And within 2 weeks, that was solved, right? So my thing is that every child in the model that we currently have, every 3rd, 4th, and 5th grader is gonna have that same experience across the district by just adding that one section instead of it being one class has X amount of kids and the other one has Y. So I guess the equity piece is what we need to focus on, right? As we're trying to figure out this decision that we're gonna make in December. Because at the end of the day, it's about what we're doing for all the kids of the district, right? Overall, and what we're offering them K through 12th grade, right? So I think that's important for us to think about as we just, navigate through this. But I also think that we need to have data because we're only a year and a half into the Princeton model. And I feel like we need to do the
Well,
work.
yeah, I want to, and then I'm really gonna have to run out of here, but the configuration is one thing. It's what are you going to do?
Mhm.
What is the quality of the programs that you're gonna offer children? We could debate, but that's just avoidance behavior, because the real challenge for this board, call my Uber, the real challenge for this board is to make a decision about the quality of care, not the physical organization. I mean, that is important, but even whatever we do, if we don't have good instruction going on, it doesn't matter. So this board needs to focus on what do we want for young children up through 3rd grade. And life is not fair. It's the first thing you teach children as an early childhood teacher. When they tell you it's not fair, you tell them life's not fair. So we can never have everyone gets, but our investment is in the younger children. And if they start off wrong, it doesn't matter what kind of configuration. So I would encourage you to spend more time talking about what happens in those classes. What kind of teachers do we want? What kind of leaders do we want? What is our philosophy of education of young children? And that will help you get to the configuration.
Let me just, because now we're going to get into a debate here, but it's important. I wanted to bring it forward and have the conversation because I heard things today and it continues And not, I don't mean what you just said, I'm talking about earlier. And there's an idea that if you don't have all the kids in one school with one principal in one grade level, everything else falls apart. We don't have equity, we don't have this, we can't get equality. And I don't believe that. I believe that you could have, I don't care, you could have gone back to your 3 K-5 buildings. I say, from what I learned, from what I studied, what I looked at, and what I heard from all of you, and I've learned from the community, is, and I'll say it, it's not gonna be popular, but I'll say it, you know, I always say things the way that I see them. And in the past, the neglect of prior administrations and boards of not addressing the inequities is what caused the problem. I say we could go back to, say, 2 schools, whatever. I plan B is my thing, so I'll say it anyway. And the 2 elementary, similar to your grade, and have the appropriate instruction with everybody on the same page. But we have to change some things that we do here. If we're going to commit to this, then we've got to have professional development where we're able to get those teachers together, even if they're in 2 separate buildings, and allow quality professional development to take place, even if I have to inconvenience parents by having early dismissal or early or late arrival in order to provide time for the teachers to get together. We don't have the luxury of just simply saying we're gonna, I think your recommendation was once a week. And we don't have the luxury of having the late entry every once a week all throughout the
You
year.
could also do summer institutes.
Right. So it's those things that I know
I guess
we can solve.
I guess my question is, if we have a multitude of things that we have not addressed yet, we haven't worked on, we haven't solved, but we're trying to solve it, which is building placement, because from what I'm getting, what you just said, is that if we don't figure out what kids are learning and how they're learning, it doesn't matter where they're learning. So
Well, I just
if
want to
we
be
don't
clear.
focus on
It
that.
does matter. I'm just trying to help you prioritize
Mhm.
what comes first.
First.
And that you're not changing the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Mhm.
First, you have to have a core belief about how children learn and how you want them to learn. I'm not saying the configuration is not important. I just think that we're attending to the wrong things in terms of priority.
Thank you.
Are transitions the way that they are right now good for kids? The way that we are configured right now, are the transitions, in your professional opinion, good for kids?
Again, I have to say, good for kids for what? What are you doing in those grades? I'm just gonna keep on pushing you back there, because if I give you a flip answer like it's good for kids, I don't know, because I haven't gone in classrooms. I need to see what's going on in those
I'll give
classrooms.
you an example.
Okay,
Okay, I happen to know that our grades didn't necessarily communicate. So K1's in one building, 2 3s in another, 4 5s in another. I happen to know that there's many teachers in 1st grade that didn't speak to 2nd grade teachers, and they didn't introduce the students on their roster. That's an example to me that never happened in a community school, because those teachers were in the building together, they collaborated between grade levels. And now they're not sharing between the buildings.
There's no vertical.
But
so you can have a formalized transition program.
Right.
In other words, the receiving teacher, let's say we were at pre-K, K1. We have activities that go on before
Yeah, you
the
have to have,
children, but you have to have structured
Yeah.
transition. Kids need to visit the school they're gonna go to. The teacher who's gonna receive them needs to come to their school
right,
and see, that's the continuity.
Right.
So a district can put in place the set of activities that promote. I'm concerned about the pre-K, K, and 1 teacher talking to one another. I'm concerned about them getting professional development. I'm concerned about them saying, you know, Maurice can come over to my classroom during the reading period. Because that's where he is. We're not promoting him, but this experience might be richer for him than where you are. So there's all kinds of opportunities for collaboration if the structure is in place. Without structure, and I mean structure in terms of procedures, it's chaos.
Yeah.
It's
It is.
chaos. And start simple. You know, don't make it complicated. I just put out pre-K, K1, because that's a simple thing. And what can we learn? We're learning as we go along. If we mandate, then it just grows. So what can we learn playing around with this? It doesn't seem like many people, you know, I just been in your district for one day, but don't seem like many people are happy with what we have present.
Well,
Well, I will
Yeah,
say,
just-
not
yeah.
everyone who
Mhm.
was there was representative of the community.
Mhm.
But I'm just gonna say too, like, some of the concerns that I'm hearing, like with that piece, those are fixable.
Right.
Those
So
are
the-
tangible, fixable things that we can
100%.
do. And we need to always then go back to our
No
focus
matter
of that
what plan you're
quality
in.
of instruction.
My point is that when we were in community schools, what I've learned by being on the board and being involved is that there was not collaboration between the three schools. Now, we're in Princeton plan, and there is not collaboration between the three schools. Maybe there is to some extent, but from the experiential, right, because we're in it, there's not, right? Like,
But
there's
that's one
limited.
piece that we're maybe lacking on that we
But I'm
can
saying
work on.
this
where-
didn't change.
But
It's what
there
it
were
was.
other issues.
What did
Any
it promise
model
to
that you're
do?
in, there should be.
What did it promise to do?
What did what?
The Princeton, what did it promise to do?
Save money,
Save money.
wasn't about students.
So what we're talking about this evening, just so we're clear, is about students.
Yeah.
And to do the right thing for children costs money. That's just the reality, if you're gonna do it right.
I think we also, what wasn't done when it was changed was getting community, the whole, well, no, the whole community. Like, we're going to survey, hopefully maybe do like a thought exchange with the community to get not just the people that he spoke with today, the entire community, not just to the people that are the loudest, everybody. And I mean everybody's opinion on what they want, because you said, ready children, ready schools, and ready families. I want to know,
And community.
and communities, and the community deserves, since they pay the taxes here, what they want. And I think that, you know, I'm, for one, ready to listen to everybody, not just the loudest.
And I would just add, you take all of that in, and then there are professional decisions that
That's
have to be made in the interest of children.
That's right.
You gather all the intake, but at the end of the day, I'm sorry.
I
go
thought
ahead.
Jen's trying to say something.
Now, that's what I was about to say. So we do need to make sure that, yes, we listen to everyone, but at the end of the day, we make the decision in the best interest of children. This can't be about what somebody wants today, or what somebody wanted yesterday, or what somebody thought they had 30 years ago that lived here. It has to be in the best interest of children today, where we are presently. And I think that's really important.
I think we're also in a very difficult position because those who are in it, and when I say in it, it means you have a child that's probably in grades 2 through 4, because if you're 5, they're moving on. Or they have multiple children in elementary school. It's been disrupted, right? These children were impacted by the changes. There was change always causes disruption. And if you make another change, no matter what direction is it in, you're going to make another disruption. But we have to be thinking about the children who are in pre-K, who are 3, who are 2, who are 1, who don't even live here yet. Sadly, right? And I'm talking about my own kids. I have to say, well, he's been disrupted. He had a transition. Whatever the plan is, whatever the board decides, he will have to deal with. It can't be about the children who are going to be disrupted again. We have to take into consideration 100%, but it really has to be about the future and the long term and what's best for all of them.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I think You know, part of this board's fiduciary duty is to do what's best for the district and for the kids of this district. I know we're all impacted because we have elementary students and kids in the grades now, but it's not really about us. It's about, we were elected to these seats to make the hard decisions of what we felt was right for the district and for all of the kids of the district. So I think if we lead with that and focus on the equity piece and the learning part for all of the kids of this district, I think we can make great decisions here that will be impactful overall for a very long time to come. So I think everybody just needs to be thinking in that realm, which I agree with you. It's just, we just have to stay centrally focused on that. It's not just about us and the ones that are in it, but also the entire district and this diverse community that we're all living in and what people expect to see our schools looking like and represented in that.
But I would only say that the next time around, it has to be something other than saving money. And communicating to your multiple communities what we're doing and why we're doing it. And if the interest of children is the driver, then we need to have the data and the research that tells us this is the best way to go. Because people do not like things imposed on them. And there's a preparation for getting people ready for change. I'm running a group of ambassadors of change, trying to change the mental models of people, how they perceive early childhood education. So there is, you know, and while I'm at it, and I can hear the engine of my Uber, you might want to consider
Like I'm out of here.
a professional communications outfit. You know. You just might want to consider that. Because even loud people have a point of view. And when there is disruption in the mental models of your citizens, there is some work that needs to be done. And I would strongly now recommend a communication firm.
I just, the way a person thinks about a situation affects their emotional response. So I don't think the emotional response is good or bad, but I know it comes with the way they think about a situation. So when I say I don't want to just listen to the loudest people, I heard that emotional response. I want to hear everybody's voice.
No, I hear that, but still, you need a communication.
Yes,
skill.
we do.
Great, I'm out of here. Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This is very.
Right. Right. Anything else? We're saving all of our new business and policy work and all of that for our next actual board meeting, which is Tuesday. It's a Tuesday, October 3rd, because that Wednesday is high school back, meet the teacher, not back to school, meet the teacher night. So Tuesday, October 3rd is the next board meeting. All right, can I have a motion to close the meeting?
Right over here.
All in favor? Here, thank you.